Thank you all very much for coming this evening. My name is Katherine Stout. I'm head of programme here. I hope, and I'm sure you've all had a chance to enjoy this wonderful show. I can honestly say it's been such a privilege to work with Betty and to present this exhibition at the ICA, which has had already an extraordinary response. When Vincenzo de Bellis came to us and suggested that we do this show, we immediately responded to how extraordinary the work that Betty's been making over the last 10 years, which is what the show represents, seems so amazingly fresh and contemporary. But also we felt that we should be righting a wrong, in fact, which is that it's her first solo institutional show in the UK. And I'm glad that many of us share our opinion. So I don't think Betty needs much introduction to this audience, but to say that it's unusual for the ICA to be following a retrospective at the Met Museum in New York, which was 10 years ago, and she's in many collections all over the world and has had many shows as well. But yeah, and you'll hear lots more about that. Vincenzo de Bellis is co-director and curator at Peephole Art Centre in Milan. Since 2012, he's also been artistic director of My Art, which is the International Modern and Contemporary Art Fair in Milan. And I need to get this pronunciation right, but his most recent exhibition is Ennesima, an exhibition of 7 exhibitions on Italian art, which is still on view as part of the Triennial de Milan until the 6th of March. So I'm very happy to hand over to Betty and Vincenzo. Thank you.
Thank you, Katherine. Well, thanks to all of you to be here tonight. And well, before starting, I want to say a few words about, how nice was to work here at the ICA. And my first and main thanks goes to Betty, whose friendship and closeness to me has been a gift for the last 2 years and a half. And we met 2 years ago, 2 years and a half ago, and we suddenly started working on ideas about a possible show. But well, we will go into this later. Then I really want to thank the ICA, everyone who has been working to make this happening, and especially Katherine and Gregor, who have been so good with us, with Betty, with me, and they were super interested in what we were proposing, and I couldn't think a better venue in UK for presenting Betty's work. So thank you to both of you, and thanks to all the crew at the ICA. The technicians have been great, and we work eight days, but it was a pleasure every day. So I have a set of 6-7 questions for Betty. It's gonna run about 45 minutes, and then we will open to your questions. I didn't even know whether I'm gonna be able to ask you all the questions, because I am sure that you will be answering and go long. But that's what I want. I really want you to talk about your work, and I know that all these people are here for this reason. They want you to talk about the work and who you are and why we are here tonight. So I'm just gonna make some very, very basic questions so that you are free to talk. So let's start from, we start from the exhibition, because, it's the something that you can all see here. And as Katherine was saying, we selected works from the last 10 years. And basically it's after the Met show. Because we both think, and also with Katherine, that the Met show was a turning point in your practice and your career. And I would like you to say more about this, why, in a way, the Met was a turning point, and in what way your work has been changing slightly in these 10 years.
Okay, thanks, Vincenzo. And again, thanks, of course, to the ICA and everybody who's worked on the show. It's been a great pleasure. Before I answer your question, I want to say thank you to Vincenzo, because, you know, the nicest way for an artist to meet somebody is through their work. And that's what happened with the two of us. And the other thing that I think made it so easy for us to work together was that we're both kind of hybrids. I live in Italy, I have lived in Italy more than half my life, half of the time, but I'm American. And Vincenzo is Italian, but he studied graduate school in the United States. So we sort of have this sense of being from both countries in common. And I think the last time we gave a talk, we flipped from one language to the other without even realizing it. So thanks, Vincenzo. Okay, it's really been fun. Now, to go back, the show at the Met was, you know, an amazing event for me, and it was all very exciting. But then, when it was over, I was sort of left with the question of, now what do I do? I thought I was old when I was 75, but I wasn't old at all. I had a lot of years ahead of me. So I think for me it really was a kind of liberating experience, because I had the sense that so many people had seen what I was doing, what I had done, and that I was free to sort of go on and do something quite different, and somehow not be self-conscious about it. And I think I had been and became really very interested, continued to be very interested in the context that my work was seen in. And this led me really in the direction of painting and making paintings which incorporated the ceramic works. So I think that's sort of the direction my work has gone in a great deal, using perhaps other materials, combining other materials with the clay, feeling more relaxed about that just because I use clay, I didn't always have to use clay for every single thing I thought of.
Yeah, but there's a work that, well, you actually started mixing canvases and clay before the Met show. That was around 2001, 2002. But I know that there's a reason why you started doing that. And I want you to say why.
I hope I remember the reason.
Well, you still do that. You should remember.
Okay. Why I started...
Well, you said that you wanted to create a context.
No, I did say that. I thought I already said that. Anyway,
Okay.
No, I definitely wanted to create a context for the work. I think it's sort of, I mean, in my mind, it's interesting because I have made prints for many years, 35 years probably. I work with a printmaker in Colorado, and at this point, you know, pretty much once a year we make a woodcut or a collaged print, woodcut, lithograph. And in doing this, I started to use the ceramic pieces as the characters in the prints. So I think that the paintings really, in a way, grew out of that experience. And to maybe that's it for that.
Okay. So, but when, you know, these days when you had a lot of press, people coming and asking you questions, and they were all interested in, you know, the way you make your works. But when we had our conversations, I know that you like talking about how to make your works, how you cook the clay, etc. But we always go more in depth about the content of your work, what the work is about, in terms of form, in terms of content, in terms of iconographies. And well, it would be nice if you can say where the iconographies of the work are coming from, and what are all the relationships that you have with the art from the past, and even with the contemporary art that you might find in your travel.
Right, but I think I've been interested in painting, you know, all of my life, and I have learned a great deal from painting long before the Met show, certainly. But I think I've been very interested in the way painting, in a Roman fresco, transforms the interior of a space. And so I think as you see my work, you sort of see that. I'm interested in Roman painting. I'm interested in, at the moment, I'm totally besotted with Bonnard paintings. So I've been looking at a lot of modernist painting. I think I started off really looking at pots and looking at the drawings on the pots, but then how do they relate? How do they move around the pot, so that it's not just about the iconography of what it is, but it's how it's relating to that round form, or how the handle, you know, it takes it someplace, extends it. I think you can see in my work a lot of admiration for Japanese screen painting. I think my work is very eclectic. I think that the first image that may come to mind is apparent, but that I hope that if a person stays with it, there continue to be things to see, and to be sort of clues, to be, I don't like really to use the word memory, I think it's used as a cliche, but that it reminds you of things. I think that my way of appreciating and looking at art is that it triggers something that in my mind, in my memory, or in my fingers somehow, so that I try to have that happen in the work that I'm making, so that the first time you see it, you may see something which seems obvious, but there's a lot, you know, I hope there's a lot of other things there too. It's never just one thing. It's made of many, many parts.
Yeah, but there's, you know, all your work is always also related to a specific form, more than any other, which is the vase. And, you know, the iconography of the vase and the form of the vase, there is, you know, it's really has a meaning for you, which also is related to the human figure, and especially to the female body.
Right. Okay. I think that if you think about it, it's pretty easy to talk about in terms of the piece which is in the show called the Kimono Ladies. And I think that for me, the vase is the archetypal ceramic object. And the vase is also always a symbol for a figure, for a woman. And because metaphorically, and it's a container, and it has that it has that connection for everyone. It's also simply there in history. If you make pots and you're aware of vases, you see them everywhere. And there's, there isn't a fountain without a vase that has the water pouring out of the pitcher into the pot. If you look up in a room with a Roman fresco, there are the vases along the top of the wall. If you see, the entrance from a house to a palace, there are the vases beside the door. And so I think having fallen in love with clay and worked with it, it always seemed to me that if I make something that's a vase, everybody knows it's made of clay. And so it's about this material and about the universality of it and how wonderful and how many different vases can be made in different cultures. And so it's a rich history for me to sort of connect to.
Yeah. And why did you fall in love with clay?
Why did I fall in love with clay? Who
because
knows?
It has been a long, long love affair.
It's been a long love affair. I think partly, well, it's like magic clay, isn't it? Those of you who are here, who, you out of nothing, there you are, you make something, and then you put it in the kiln, and you always hope it's going to come out better than when it went in. At least I do, and I still do. Maybe the kiln will give me something. I think it's also in that I think it's important that it's a friendly material, and the things that are made with it are rather friendly. We get into the discussion of the domestic, which is a later question, but that the domestic object made of clay is something most of us have had experience with. So it seems like we can understand it. So one isn't making a work of art that people sort of scratch their heads and sort of wonder, what am I supposed to understand about this? I think when something's clay and when it's a vase, everybody can respond to it. And I think I probably responded to that. I certainly responded to the using my hands, and which is what I like to do, and taking my hands and forming it and making something with it.
Yeah, but it also started to, because you said to me that you like to be surrounded by objects that you were doing and living with the objects you were doing. And I think this goes, you just said that before, but it just goes into the idea of domesticity, that it's a subject that you are kind of using or kind of addressing in recent shows. This in particular is called the theater of the domestic, which is in a way it's a sort of an oxymoron. Domesticity is something that we deal every day with. It's says the word, says this, and the theater, it's something that it's staged for. So what is the reason of the theater of the domestic, and what the idea of domesticity, why the domesticity is so important for you and maybe for all of us?
Well, I think, the theater, in a way, to get back to that title, is the exhibition space. And it's, we come in there and it's like a theater. You walk in and it's, wow, look at this. It's big, beautiful room. And then upstairs it is a domestic space. So that, in a sense, is the theater part of it. The domesticity, I think, for me, starts with the fact that I come from having been a production potter, a functional potter, and making things that were used that I use, I continue to use, and figuring out, since my work has sort of moved along, I think, into the world of painting, bringing those domestic objects, the pitcher, the plate, the teacup and saucer, into the paintings as the subjects of the paintings, along with the table, which has become, in the most recent work, is, somehow I can't get away from making tables and having things on tables. I'm going to have to, but through this show I certainly haven't. But I think that that's, where it comes from. I think just to go back a little bit, certainly our table and our tables in our houses, in our home in New York and the one in Italy, are very important theaters for us. I think that, breakfast is, our son thinks it's the most important meal in our house. That's, if he comes to the table, we can have a real conversation at breakfast. And I think the cup the coffee's in, the pitcher, whose pitcher is it? I have a teapot of Janis Chalenko's that comes out for tea. These are things which are, they're really passionate loves, and they're really important to me. It's interesting, the hotel we're staying at, if you order a single espresso, it comes in a lovely little cup with a little spoon, and it tastes 100 times better than if you order a double espresso and it comes in a great big cup and it's sort of floating in the bottom. So, I don't know. These are they're not casual, sort of funny things. They give me real pleasure, and George and I have lengthy conversations about them.
Yeah, well, I know, I've been there, so I know it is. And actually going to Betty's house is really an experience. Well, first of all, it's a beautiful place, both New York and Antella, but also because you are really surrounded by George's work, Betty's work, and it's beautiful. But the domesticity, I think, also makes me think about also to the recent works. Again, going back to the canvases and to the how do you mix canvas and ceramics? Because in a way, what you do with your house and living with your objects is also what you do with your paintings. Because in a way, your paintings, and that's my own opinion, and I never shared with you, so it's the first time you hear this, is that your paintings are kind of the opposite of what collage is. So if the collage is something to bring the reality into a painting, you do the opposite. You bring the painting on to the reality, which is the kind of the useful objects, which is the vase in this case, or other kind of ceramic objects that you do. Do you agree with me, or is just my own view?
No, but I love hearing what you have to say. I mean, it's fascinating to understand that it's kind of a flip from what I think. In making painting, it's obvious that there's been the history of painting, and so who am I, and what do I have to say if I start doing painting? And I think the painting. I mean, for me to even use that word is, this is a daring experience to say this, that I make paintings in front of all of you, because I just felt that wasn't my world, and that wasn't where I didn't have any right to be doing this. I think I've just come in, especially in seeing the works here, to recognize, and at the show in Italy, to recognize, well, I guess they really are paintings, aren't they? And it's interesting that I came across it. I think what I worried about was, you know, what in the world do I have to offer that's somehow different than what painting has been, a different way of looking at it. And I think that seemed to be the addition of the ceramic elements to it, because the relief elements on it, and then and very much the relief piece in front of it, the sort of three-dimensional vase, that's sort of bringing it. And I'm talking about a formal thing because I'm really very much a formalist. Things have to make sense formally to me. So I think that in a way, for me, the ceramics seems to permit me to be able to make these paintings and to have them go someplace other than perhaps the painting that maybe started and inspired me.
Yeah, but you said that you didn't feel that you, in a way, you could talk about painting, but that's something that I always disagree with you, because, you know, looking at your work, and the reason why I was interested in that, you know, I think most of the people who came to see the show realize this, is that you belong to well, that's my opinion again, and, you know, everyone can say the opposite, but you belong to a moment of painting, which is, you know, thinking about artists like Ellen Frankenthaler or other colorful paintings that have been, you know, going on for decades, and I think you belong to that history. Well, you are peers with some of them, but you still do this, and you were doing that also when you were only using ceramics. You don't think so?
No, I think I was. I think I was. I think I've been interested. I've been involved with painting for a long time. I think, you know, it's part of the tradition of ceramics, after all, painted, you know, form, and through much of the world, ceramics. And so I don't think I was, you know, going a long ways away. I think it's, you know, it is a very traditional thing to have form and then to paint on it and to change your perception of that form. And I think as you look at the exhibition, all of those pieces in that main space, that's really, you know, that's really what they're about. And I think it's been, you know, interesting in those pieces to sort of create the ceramic form and to create it so that I think it's successful or interesting as a form. To do this probably not with a single form, but with perhaps two, and two forms where then the space in between becomes really the focus of the piece. And I'm very interested in what's going on in the spaces in between and around these forms, or then from two to go to three parts. And then the challenge of painting being, okay, I've got these three pieces, and how do I make them into one? And so how do I paint in such a way with these three that I reconnect them? But to have it be also the complicated viewing, and I think this is something I haven't talked about that I'd like to talk about, and that is, so maybe there's a painting on them, but your eye goes, I think, from one across to the next, and then as you stay with it, you start sort of seeing, well, how perhaps that shape and the shape of the void in between interact, but then how does the whole clay shape, how does the painting fit into that? And perhaps I haven't painted the whole thing. I've left part of it so that it's not a painting on a rectangular canvas. It's on this complicated shape. And then if I walk around to the other side of it, I can make it a totally different experience looking at it. And for many years I talked about this, and I had some line about how it was emotionally different on the other side. And finally, I just admitted, it's a lot of work to make these pieces. I really like to paint. So if I paint one side in one way, and the other side, I get two paintings out of the same piece. And I think, and then, the other thing that can happen is one side is good and the other side's bad. You can put the bad side to the wall. I mean, in other words, it sort of just gives the piece a little bit more life. The good and bad is interesting because there's a piece in this show, a smaller triptych, which I was just thought the other side. One side has a lot of red, and it's very clear, it's very graphic, and it's just fine. And I thought the other side was just a disaster. And then when I saw it here, I really like the other side. The red side doesn't interest me at all. So, time and space, as allows one, any artist, to do this, a show.
Well, there's also the idea of saving, because you always want to save a surface or using it in a different way. And you do it with the Wallpapers work, where you just, they are all leftovers of other works. And how did you start making them? Why did you start making the leftovers, the wallpapers? Because it plays a very important role in this show.
Yes, it does. And I think the leftovers is, I think sometimes my best cooking is to look in the refrigerator and, sort of see what there is. And then you're more creative about what you're going to eat. So this obviously, maybe because I was a depression baby, I don't throw things away very readily. And I really get many of my ideas simply from looking around my own studio. So the wallpaper piece is perhaps a misnomer for what's here, but it started with I throw and stretch these big slabs of clay and cut out parts that I'm interested in, and then instead of just throwing away or throwing back into the clay bin the pieces that are left over, I started looking at them, and I found them very interesting because they're forms which my hand would not have made. I would never have thought of cutting them out. So I may do some kind of intervention in them, but I started saving them. I put 2 holes in them so I can put them on the wall, and I would fire them. And I had boxes and boxes and boxes that became full of these pieces. And at one point, a few years ago, we came back from 6 months in Italy, and I felt like I couldn't move in my studio in New York. I had all these things, and I better just figure out what to do with them. And I asked my assistant to take a roll of brown paper, put them all on the roll, and draw around them. And I would at least, if they were in the boxes, I would know what there was, so I could fish something out if I thought it might be useful. When he put them on the brown paper, they looked like rugs, and I thought that was very interesting. So I started making a series, and we don't have any in the show, but I started making a series of sculptures of rugs, and they're painted canvas and then the ceramic pieces on top of them. And they were around, and I have shown them. I then became interested and aware of all of the other artists that have worked on the floor with something like that. And I'm bad with names, so now I remember. Linda Benglis did an amazingly beautiful rug on the floor that they showed at the new museum not long ago. And I sort of thought, wow, she did that a long time ago, but I guess I can make a rug too. You know, she doesn't own the rug, and you know, and then you think about rugs and how does a museum show rugs? Do they put them on the wall? Do they put them on the floor? How are they seen? And I started, you know, looking at this, being very aware of, you know, what to do with a rug. I think what I ended up doing with the rug is to take the so-called Aztec vase and placing it on the rug. And, you know, that happened just because I had the rug on the floor of the studio, I had the Aztec vase, and I just put it down. I didn't, it wasn't about some thought-out concept, which my work really rarely is about some thought-out concept. It's really about the need to see something. And anyway, when I put that vase on the rug, and then I felt it was, you know, it had come home, and it really completed the piece for me. And I think it's kind of an interesting thing because, sure, because what? Let me think a minute. Well, I'll remember it and tell you later today. Maybe.
These are the rugs, just to show to people.
Yeah, there are. That's a period room at the Brooklyn Museum, and where.
So you were saying that they are important for. Well,
yeah, they are.
Okay.
But they're also, you know, and also a domestic object. So. I think, you know, again, the idea of domesticity is in the subject matter, in that sense, in the concept of my work.
Well, I would be interested. She said that Linda Benglis doesn't own the idea of the carpet, but what if a younger artist start using the vase? What you would say to him or her? Do you own the idea of the vase?
No. No, and then I think, you know, the vase upon vase pieces, I owe a lot. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I owe everything to Brancusi because the base is a sculpture about a base, and the vase and the top is a sculpture about a vase. And so that's certainly the concept of Brancusi. I think what I, now if I forget it again, you'll... I think there's a difference, and it's come to me at least. I mean, you may not agree with me, but that a pot, a vase, can exist kind of anywhere, and it does exist anywhere. It goes on the table. It goes on the shelf. It goes in the kitchen cupboard. It goes perhaps with flowers or without flowers. But a piece of sculpture seems to me that one of the differences between, say, a pot and a piece of sculpture is that the piece of sculpture, somehow the artist has to be and is responsible for where it sits. So the where it sits is determined. And I'm talking about sculpture perhaps not as it's defined today, but I think as it used to be defined. And I find that a big difference in, say, the vase which just sits on the floor and the vase which sits on the carpet, and that defines where it is. And that was the point I was trying to remember to make.
So I have really one last question, then we can ask you to, if you want to ask Betty some questions. So yesterday we got the visit of some friends, curators, that described you as an artist for the future. What do you think about that? I agree.
And I challenged them and said, I think you made a mistake. I'm an artist about the past. But, well, who knows? You know?
Well,
I think, well, I mean, I think all of us who are artists hope that in some way we're making something which continues to have a life. So in that sense, it is for the future. Whether, you know, I'm not involved with digital. Well, I did a digital print for here, but you know, I'm really not involved with highly technical things. I work in a way that I am able to understand and to control, and I don't have a automatic, you know, a digital kill or anything of the kind. I you know, in Italy, I just look at the color and I use cones. I mean, I'm not really, in that sense, I don't feel that I'm at all in the future, technically. Whether the work will continue to have some kind of resonance in the future, I hope so. And ceramics, after all, if not the paintings, doesn't change, and it's here. It's been here for, you know, 4,000 or 5,000 years, so it's nice to be part of that tradition.
thank you. Thank you. Is there? Yeah.
Thank you for the talk. I just wanted to ask about the void shapes that seem to replicate the shape of the vase in the foreground of the painting. And I was really interested in the way that that void shape seems to be very gestural, almost like a sort of miniature explosion. But I'm curious as to the conceptual thinking of that void shape and what it's doing and how it operates.
Can you repeat that? Because I'm very hard of hearing, so. The void of the vase.
Yeah, and what it means
in a conceptual way. Well, I think that, you can come closer, maybe I could hear you more. Have you got a?
Would you like me to say it louder? Would
yes,
that work better for you? Okay, so what I was saying was the void shape seemed really interesting for me, thinking about it as a conceptual device, connecting the painting to the vase in the foreground and trying to understand the logic and the thinking process behind that decision.
It's hard. It's a hard question for me to answer. I think it's very important to me that there be a void. I think that. And that I think it's I mean, maybe I'm off of what you're asking me, but I think that it read as a vase, and the void is, you know, sort of says that. I think conceptually, and I'm probably off of your question, but you know, if we go back to those, I don't know, it's sort of off, but to go back to the kimono girls, they. Taking a vase, which each of them is, and then putting a garment on it, putting a little fabric on it. And this case, it was a collaboration with my friend Esther, who made the costumes. But and how that immediately, made those vases into women. But the fact that there is that void, I think I'm not answering your question, am I? I'm just avoiding it. But anyway, I'm sorry. Okay.
I'll try to speak clearly. Thank you very much indeed. I'm fortunate because I'm going to be reviewing your exhibition for Crafts magazine, so I'll declare an interest. I think you'll probably be relieved to know it will be an extremely enthusiastic commentary, I hope, if it's well enough written. I was fortunate enough also to see your retrospective at the Met in New York back in 2006. I've just got two very practical questions to ask. One is about the role of geography in your location in your work. And I'm thinking of that particularly in the context, for instance, of the abstract expressionist Joan Mitchell, whose retrospective I've just seen in Cologne. And when you look at her work, her painting, there is something that crosses the Atlantic in a very distinctive way. So I'd like to ask you to comment about geography and location. And the second question is the tiniest question of all, which is looking at your work, thinking about what you've said about domesticity and the function of your pieces in people's lives. I wonder, have you ever thought about, or perhaps done, work either in glass, I'm thinking of stained glass, or possibly in terms of jewellery, both of which I think would potentially be very amenable to the language that I see so vividly in your work. Thank you.
Okay, well, I'll answer the second question first, because it's easy. I have worked in glass. I have been invited by the French Ministry of Culture, which has a glass workshop in Sirva, and I worked there, kind of off and on for 10 years and made kind of two different bodies of work. I learned, in the first place, to respect people who work in glass, very difficult material, and it was fascinating. I mean, I like making my own work, so I know nothing about working with glass, so that I worked, with somebody. I think I tried finally to have pieces where I made parts of them in clay, and then they were cast in glass, and then attached to blown things. So I found it fascinating. I think everybody thought I was going to use color. I felt I use color all the time. What glass was about was the fact that it sort of didn't exist. It was transparent, and I tried to formally play with making it exist, but having a kind of game of the spaces in between the vases and how they work, the spaces around. With the glass, by sandblasting the surface, I could have the spaces sort of become much more complicated just looking through them. So, it was a very interesting experience. I made, and I believe in those slides, there's one. I made some chandeliers, one an applique, which was a combination of cast aluminum and cast glass that was a lighting fixture. So it was fun. Now, the other question about geography is a very interesting one, because I went to Italy the first time in 1951 when I finished school, and I had friends who were there who said, "Why aren't you coming?" And I stopped what I was doing, got a job, saved $900, and took a boat to Italy. And, I just fell in love with Italy, and it was an amazing experience. And as I've said, I think in quote, Boston just doesn't have huge buildings like the Duomo in Florence, which was white and pink and blue, and it really blew me away. So I think, and we went back in 1960 and spent a year. I worked with Giorgio Ferrero, the same actual painter turned potter that I had worked with in 51. Then we were back for a year in 65. I had a Fulbright and George had a fellowship, and the kids went to school in public schools in Italy. And I, at that point, was just, focused my work all on Etruscan pots, which I just felt, they were, when I was a student, the sort of interest in ceramics, really the only thing to read was Bernard Leach's book. And it was looking to the East, looking to the Oriental traditions. And when I got to Italy, I realized there was a lot of other things. There were a lot of other things going on with clay, mainly, and certainly painting on the forms. And so it absolutely directed my work. I think at this point, just to go back I don't know, we bought our house, a farmhouse in Italy 40 years ago, and we have studios there, and we work there. So we first went for 4 months a year, now we go for 6 months a year. So I think it's a total mixture, and I think that being American absolutely influences what I do. The way I look at art, the way I look at contemporary art is I'm very American. On the other hand, I'm also, I think, very Italian. So there's sort of a mixture. But my work changes in the different countries. So as you're saying at Joan Mitchell, you could see it. I think you could see it, you can see it somewhat in material if you're, sophisticated about what ceramics is. Most of the pieces in this show were made in the studio in Italy. So they were made using the clay there, which is a lower temperature clay than the clay I use in America. So there are physical differences. But I think the aesthetic differences and the fact that we've had a rich life where we've traveled a great deal, we've spent time in India, we've spent, we're very fortunate in that sense. And I'm a very visual person, and I go to museums, I look at art, I look at doorknobs, and it all somehow is part of what I'm doing. So it's hard to take it apart, but I think geography is very important.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for the talk. It's been really interesting. I've been a great admirer of your ceramic work for a while, particularly like your early ceramic work. And I just wondered, I'm fascinated by your change from using glaze to using paint and different pigments on your ceramics. And I wondered whether you could talk a little bit about the relationship between the colours and the surfaces that you can get with glazing and the use of paint on your contemporary work at the moment. What do you think about both of those things?
I think generally I'm a purist, and I don't use paint on the ceramics, but I certainly am capable, and it took quite a while to do this the first time. Something comes out of the kiln, and it's a great big piece. It was a lot of work to get it in the kiln. There's a fair amount of work to fire the kiln in Italy. And I think, boy, it just needs a little clarity, maybe a black line. I don't put it back in the kiln. I just paint that black line on it. So, or I'd really like to have a raspberry red, and I just don't have a raspberry red glaze. And so I'll use some paint. But I would say, on the whole, the ceramic pieces are glazed. The ceramic process is part of what they are, so that the white slip of the white surface is a kaolin which is fired. I think I like the fact that the white on the paintings is also clay, so that I'm using clay on the canvas, or I use a terra sigillata. It's, I think, painting is so immediate. It's a heady experience, because ceramics, there's a time lag. There's sort of making the piece, getting it, it's wet clay, getting it together, having it dry without falling apart, getting it into the kiln, getting it out of the kiln, figuring out what do I want to do with the color, what's going on, getting it back into the kiln, hoping it's going to, do something the way I'd like it to happen. And when I paint now, pretty much, sometimes I use clay on the canvas, but it's on the floor, it's very wet, but an hour later, it's dry, and I can see what it is. So it's kind of heady that it's that immediate. But I think I'm used to the time of the ceramics, and I think I really need it, because I don't know, I'm always seduced by what I make, and think it's the best thing I've ever made, and how could I be such a good artist? And, and then, the next day, the next week, 10 days later, I sort of look at it and think, well, wait a minute, there's a lot, this isn't, that section is great, but the rest of it is a mess. So I think that the sort of time of the clay is important to me, and to my sort of just being allowing myself the time to calm down and really see something. So
I had an idea that when you said that a sculptor makes an object and needs to know where he's going to place it, but a potter, a ceramicist, might make a vase, and it could go anywhere. I think you said that a little bit earlier. And I had an idea that perhaps a sculptor takes ownership of the presence of his sculpture, whereas a ceramicist, there's a sense of non-responsibility of the finished ceramic object. It's given to the home, it's put on your table or the mantelpiece. You let go of that final responsibility. And I wonder whether the firing in a kiln also gives it a kind of barrier between that final ownership. And so I'm fascinated that you then reclaim ownership of the ceramic object by putting paint or line or carrying on the dialogue with it, with a different medium.
I think the beginning of what you said is very prescient, because I think that I was not happy with giving up ownership of that space. And I think partly, if I go back in my thinking, visits to the V&A and walking through the kind of period rooms and realizing that's where I want my work. I don't want it on those shelves in those cases with all that stuff sort of mashed together. I want it, you know, with the fireplace, with the chair, with the, and so that, I think, led me very much to feel that I wanted my work seen and shown in a context which was not limited to ceramics, and it was within a broader context to be looked at as other works of art were looked at. So it's a confusing issue, but I do think that's exactly what I feel that I've done now, you know, with these new pieces. Also, I didn't say, maybe I did, but I don't remember. Never mind. I think I said it. Okay. Anybody else?
Thanks, Betty and Vincenzo. This is a sort of follow-on question, but I wonder, we've talked a bit about the influence of painters on your work, but I wonder if you have any thoughts on your influence on painters, and particularly painters who might work with a sort of installation or like make their paintings into, I'm thinking of Mark Camille Heimwitz, for example, but I wonder if you see your influence.
I'm not hearing you, so
no.
Louder. Louder, please.
Do you see your influence on any painters, and especially painters who work with installation?
Well, I mean, George is here. I think we influence each other, and I think through our lives have. I think George has influenced me, and him. I think. Do I have an influence on other painters? I think perhaps what I've been told is that a lot of young painters are interested in my work, and I think that today art is such, you know, anything can be art. So I think we were talking earlier. I think probably through the period of minimalism, a painter, you know, they may have liked what I was doing, looked at clay, acquired it, eaten from it, had a vase, but it had nothing to do with art and with what was considered art and with what was talked about. I think today it is, and I think that everybody can look at everything and try doing everything. So I imagine I have a certain visibility, and I'm sure that, you know, some people are looking at what I do and making paintings, perhaps, which relate to it.
Thank you.
I've done a lot of collaborations with other artists, but that's been mainly my making the form and their painting on it. So that's a kind of different, you're not talking about that, so.
Hello, Betty. You mentioned that clay is, can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. That clay is magic, but I actually really liked the work that you've done with cloth that I wasn't expecting. I think you mentioned you did it with a friend, Esther. Tell me about that process. I'm interested whether you drape it. Is it fixed? Did you decide the tie? Does it move around? Because unlike the rug, which is quite fixed, these seem very immediate and alive.
Esther Gauntlet is her name, and she's a fashion designer. She's from Australia, and she also studied ceramics and kind of came into my life when my assistant fell off his bicycle and broke his collarbone. and she volunteered to help. So I think I've made two sort of bodies of work that are clothed vases, clothed sculpture. The first one, I made the pieces myself. When we had been in India, I bought very cheap saris so that I would have the courage to cut into them, and I sewed them. They were kind of like aprons and so on. I have a certain problem with my eyes now, and I really don't sew easily, so I called Esther. They're kind of draped, but they have snaps, and supposedly I can take them off and put them on again. I think I got frightened of how in the world, if I took them off and folded them up and then the pieces got crated and the costumes came separately, was I ever going to be able to dress them properly again? So we just wrapped them up with the costumes on them. But they do come off and they can go on again. That was one of the things she and I talked about. And again, I went shopping at a part of New York that has Indian stores, and they're not saris, they're, I don't know, some kind of fabric that, so I chose the fabrics, and then we kind of talked about it. She made some things. I felt that she was hiding the vases too much. Hang on, don't, we need to see that they're vases. We're not just covering them up. So, we kind of went back and forth, and that's it. It's interesting, isn't it, the two materials? Really? I have worked with fabric. I did many years ago. I've done 3 large projects at the Fabric Workshop of Philadelphia, and where we printed fabrics, silkscreen, and then I sort of made doorways that were pieced together. If any of you saw the piece I had at Frieze, London, this October, that was a piece which I made in 1980, and it had a fabric, a doorway. So, and I've done some other fabric things.
Great.
Maybe we should stop.
I want to ask a question that you're going to be able to answer. Because I was the person who asked you the question about the void, and now I'm being greedy and asking a second question. But it's to do with the use of the grid in your paintings and the way in which they have a very strong grid-like presence. And if you could talk about that decision to create that sort of very clear, graphic, grid-like system.
Yeah, I think I can answer that a little bit better than the void. It's very deliberate, and I think that the grid also, of course, indicates an interior, a house, the wall, and when I paint, I use tape, and so that it's a series of colors, of shapes, but I'm not sort of freehand to sort of painting the way I might paint on one of the ceramic vases. The grid, I think, separates the painting on the canvas from the painting on the ceramics. And it's connects it, it perhaps takes it away. I'm not trying to reproduce some kind of impressionist thing. I think I really like the sort of geometric clarity of the painting, and the way then that the ceramics can interact with that. I mean, it's about sort of formalist things. It's not about something emotional, though it is emotional when I've done it.
Okay. Thank you, Betty. Thank you. So, well, just go and see the show.